in the afternoon.
Afternoon Delight.
With Todd and Rob. Oh, yeah.
Well, I have no idea there. We kind of pulled the trigger and then things went boom.
Yeah, doing live streams with these live stream platforms, there's a lot of timing involved. Sometimes they go sideways on you.
Yeah, and I did auto start on YouTube today, and that may not have been the right choice.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Because it's kind of weird when you do auto start, because even though it's delayed, as soon as I saw it go live, it was doing the 30-second countdown. So I got to figure something else out for that. But anyway, hey everybody, welcome to the New Media Show. We are back here. At least I'm back here.
Yeah, you're the one that traveled, not me. I'm in the same spot.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because I went on a 3-day tour, kind of a little Gilligan's Island pum there, a 3-hour tour, a 3-day tour. And the morning that I was getting ready to depart, my resort host texted me while I was eating breakfast and said, "Hey, they went to typhoon condition flag 4, whatever they use a flag system over here." I'm like, "Oh, okay. How long before the storm?" "Oh, it's like 24 hours away." And I'm like, "Great." I said, "I'm still leaving on time for the airport." And he says, "Oh no." He says they cancel everything immediately.
Wow.
No ferries, no flights. I'm like, "So how
You're
do I
stuck.
leave?" He said, "You don't."
Right.
Yeah,
You're there for the duration, whatever that is.
That's
Yeah.
right. You don't. And about the time my flight was going to leave, the weather actually started to deteriorate. So it wasn't really even 24 hours.
Mm.
And then I just got stuck. And
Yeah.
so I was supposed to leave on a Tuesday, and I ended up leaving on a Saturday. And what they did was Friday night, they lifted the flag. So there's the option of riding a ferry for 11 hours, then taking 5 hours on a bus. But there was floods and mudslides and everything along the route we were going home, or I was going home from the ferry. And
Mhm.
the other right was to take this Bonka boat, held about 20 people, about an hour and 40-minute ride on the open ocean right after a typhoon, and go to an airport or an area called Kataklan, which is close to Boracay. They have a dozen flights out of there a day. So I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning, did a 2-hour van ride from hell on this most bumpy road you can imagine, and got in the Bonka boat and landed and booked my airline ticket in what's called a tricycle on the way to the airport, checked in, and literally boarded. I think it was that quick, and was out of there. But anyways, back here Saturday. So here we are. Welcome to the New Media Show, everyone, and Todd's adventures from escaping from Alcatraz. At least that's how I'm trying to.
So some of the big topics, you can probably tell from the artwork we put up there, is trying to kind of pull apart and expose kind of the download fraud that's been in podcasting for many, many years. And then also let's talk about the Joe Rogan and
Yeah.
Donald Trump event that happened on the internet with podcasting, which is, it's always a kind of a milestone moment, oftentimes, because we've seen this happen even back with George W. Bush and Obama getting on podcasts many years ago, and I think we can draw some correlation to that. And then also the rapid decline of mainstream media. So let's dive into it.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, who? Of course, what we're talking about is I guess it's a newspaper in Italy.
In Spain
That has made the top podcast list by Triton and I think Podtrac as well. And having these, 18 million downloads, which is a pretty, remarkable number for a news podcast.
118 million.
Oh, 118. I was missing a digit.
Yeah.
So it turns out that it was just auto loading. They were preloading the media every time their website. And that's, I basically has a couple of questions on this. Number one, who's their host?
I don't know. Odds are it's probably a host out of Spain, but yeah.
And number two, this is a direct violation of IEB podcast measurement guidelines. We had an issue, Blueberry did, back, I believe, in January or February, where we introduced some code into our web player that was causing auto loading, and we caught it. But we had to go back and basically make sure that there was, number one, no advertisers was impacted so that we didn't overbill an advertiser. Number two, had to inform our the folks that were affected, and it wasn't, what was weird, it wasn't all users. It was just a certain subset of users that were using a certain feature. And basically number three, we had to pull that data out of the stats. So
Mhm.
it's something now that we have specifically, if we go in there and touch any code with the player, we basically run a QA analysis on the embed to make sure none of this activity is happening. Um, and so it can happen to anyone. It happened to us, but we were monitoring for it.
Mhm.
And I don't. It appears after James sent them this email that this behavior stopped.
Yeah, I don't think we've totally painted the picture of what's going on here
Yeah.
yet. I think we're getting to the end of the conversation
Right.
before we've
Right. Right.
actually talked about what's actually happened here. So the episode that is in question here, so I guess it was being tracked by Triton out of Latin America, is based on their podcast ranker. So it does have a connection to Triton Digital, and it does look like it's hosted by Triton.
Oh.
So that's the platform that's going on here, and it does contain, I guess, programmatic advertising in the content.
Ooh.
So I mean, just think about the implications of that around
Right.
automatic revenue and advertisers going into this and being counted. It's a fairly small download. It's only 14 megabytes. So I I'm assuming that the content isn't very long,
Right.
um, but it's basically downloading numbers have predominantly happened over mobile phones in the browser, right?
Oh, so
So this is where most of this has been happening. If we look kind of historically to this, that's usually where the abuse is around players that are on web pages that are able to automatically trigger a download, and we've seen
right.
this in the past too.
Yeah.
This is not a new thing that
Right.
people have been doing.
Yeah.
So each time you go to a website, it triggers the download in the background, and the
Mhm.
user doesn't even know it's happening.
Right.
Is usually how it works. So anyway, go ahead and tell your story about how you as a platform are attacking this.
Well, we have to. It's part of our IB podcast measurement guideline standards.
Right.
So we had to we emailed the IB, said, "Hey, we had an issue. Here was the period of time that was affected. Here's the remedy that we did to make sure that
Yeah.
this wasn't going to happen. Here's what we did with our customers. Here's what we did with any impacted advertisers." But for us,
Mhm.
it was fortunate we had no impacted advertisers because we have people on programmatic as well.
Yeah.
So, and it was completely our fault. We just missed a flag in one of the settings, and so it was on us for this mistake. But we self-reported, announced it publicly on our website, and
Mhm.
really did everything we could from a mitigation standpoint to make sure that all affected parties knew how their stats were affected for this period of time where this issue was in place. And then
Yeah.
I had to go and set new processes in place. But so the question is, on their website, was it the player that was triggering the download?
Well, it's probably either the player or the website code, one of the 2.
Mm,
Usually how this works, and it's a fairly simple adjustment to the player code,
yeah,
is to actually have like auto play.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I think that can be
Well,
not actually going into a player. That can actually just happen in the background.
yeah, there's an actual setting on most HTML players within the
Mhm.
code to
Cache,
turn off
right?
preloading.
Preloading, right, exactly. That's what it
Yeah.
was.
So,
Yes.
and if you preload, that's against the measurement guidelines.
Mhm.
And I would think, we caught ourselves with the issue, and of course,
Yeah.
it's ironic because Rob, I've been pretty staunch on this particular issue, and I've called other companies out. So the chickens came home to roost. I had to call
Yeah.
myself out in this instance, right?
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Right.
so,
Yeah,
but
and it's usually done by the platform that's making the content available, on the web,
yeah,
and it's an easy adjustment to the players usually is how
yeah,
this works, and
usually very,
yeah,
very simple fix.
but, all the big platforms like Spotify and Apple and so like that don't enable that kinda functionality, so, I think that there is, um
Now, iHeart had the
I
same
don't
type
think
of
that they
issue.
yeah, and I think it was also done over their web experience as well. That happened back in 2018 over 1,000 radio show websites. So
Yeah,
you think
that's
about
yeah,
all the iHeart websites playing their podcast episodes automatically and caching
yeah,
them,
yeah,
um,
that's
in the
bad
background.
news.
Right. That's exactly
So,
what happened.
for us, it was like, stop the presses. And, it's one of those emails you get from the team member, and I'm like, you can swearing like a sailor, because of what we're gonna have to deal with. So I think that, and it's part of the regular auditing you have to know. One thing that it's unique in our IEB measurement guideline certification is that the folks that are using a redirect, that we do not have control of their website. In other words,
Mhm,
they're using a different player or whatever. Before they can use our redirect, there's a certification page that pops up that says you understand that your web player cannot preload.
mm,
You have to make sure this is a setting that is doesn't preload, and we have basically a self affidavit of the podcaster that basically says, "No, yes, I understand. I will not preload," and we make them go through a series of steps before we allow them to use the redirect, just because we can't control the player on
mhm.
people that are using our stats and our redirect. So, and again, that was part of our
Well,
certification.
unless they're players that are embeddable from your host, right?
Right,
Which if they were using a player that came off of the Blueberry platform,
right,
then you do have control over that, but
right. And those folks, we don't
yeah.
make them certify because 'cause they're customers, so
Right,
non-customers.
right.
So, we basically have had that was part of our certification requirements. Basically, they said, "Hey, you have to present this
Mhm,
a notification and get people to sign off. This is the only way we are going to certify your redirect is if you basically have, and we're supposed to self police that. Now it's very, very hard
mhm,
to, and what you really do is you set a trigger. You set a trigger for web browsers because web browsers are usually, right now, depending on some Blueberry customers are it can be high as 10 or 12%, but most folks are very, very low numbers on the web player. They're
yeah,
3%. So we basically in our system have a threshold that says once, a web stat goes above certain percentage on a show by show basis, it flags this in the system and says, "Go look." That's how we caught ourselves. Was all of a sudden we started seeing bump, 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 25 shows are above the threshold, and we're like, What's going on?"
yeah,
Um,
this does raise some questions around Triton Digital's kind of practices as well, in my view, based on what you just said. Are they reviewing clients that are using third-party players, as a method of delivery that is part of their podcast ranker,
well,
that is being gamed here? Obviously,
I
it was
I would
gamed, right?
I don't think they were held to that same level because it was specifically for the redirect because we couldn't control the player.
Well, that's what's going on
So
here. If they're part
yeah,
of the podcast ranker, that they must be part of Triton's redirect,
yeah.
or you know, so Triton can gather that information because they were ranked. This show
Well,
was ranked 12th, the 12th biggest show by downloads in Latin America.
being that when we did our first certification with IAB,
Mhm.
our hosting did not. When we did the hosting, pure hosting
Mhm.
certification using raw log files, they didn't have to do this notice. The only time that came into effect was when we got our redirect certified in round 2,
Yeah.
and this is where these additional requirements were put upon us, to make sure, AKA, that something out of our control, we couldn't, you know, and be honest with you, now that I think about it, there's nothing to stop a hosting customer from using a different player. So,
Right. Right.
potentially, that should have been in effect from the beginning. So, maybe this
Yes.
stuff
I
would go
mean,
out.
oftentimes the hosting platform doesn't know their client is
Yeah,
doing that, right?
yeah.
Because there's no probably way for Triton to know that
Mhm.
this newspaper was using its own player. Right.
But this is something simple to monitor. You just have to, like, and we just said, "Okay, what's the threshold?" What
Mhm.
threshold should we set for this type of activity? And that's how we know, um, just how we knew if there was an issue, is that was our flag that was set. So, I don't know.
I'm sure this is gonna create some interesting conversations for Triton Digital if this show was, on their programmatic platform.
Oh, it's this is what I was scared about when we had our flub
Mhm.
was, okay, do I have to go back to SoundStack and say, "Hey, these X thousands of downloads are not to be paid."
Yeah.
And do we have to refund because the advertiser has paid for those downloads?
Mhm.
Do
Or
we
they're obligated to pay 'em, whether or not they have yet is
right,
the question,
and
right?
do we have to write a check
Mhm.
back to the because, that was my big thing here was, we were involved before many, many years ago with an audit that required,
Mhm.
a media company, a significant one, to write a significant check back to advertisers based on host read overbilling. So, I was quite concerned, but, it was quick enough, the damage was small, but we had nobody on programmatic that was affected with this specific, issue.
Todd,
Um,
do you think that there's any risk to regular podcasters that maybe they need to think about, so they maybe don't fall into this? Or do you think that every time this happens, it happens with willful intent?
I think most podcasters probably don't even know, and it's not willful intent. So the question is, was this situation with this newspaper,
Yeah, or
wa
was it just an accident in the
was it an
code?
accident? Yeah. Did someone, some developer have a flag set? Again, you don't know, and if they don't respond and make a statement, which, you would hope that they would at some point make some sort of public statement.
Yeah, I think
Well,
we went through a period of time, Todd, when it was kind of in vogue, I
yeah,
guess,
yeah,
to when you load a web page that has a player on it to, turn on the automatic play, right? And I
yeah,
think we went through a period of time when it was like, "No, that's not a good thing to do.
right.
Don't automatically start playing an episode when a page loads."
I think
Right?
there's
So
if
right,
I think there's 3 settings, and
right,
if you're a developer, I might be wrong. There is autoplay,
right.
there's cache, and then
Cache, right,
there's, one more, I think, where you basically try to download the whole,
right.
but it being that was only 14 megs,
Yeah,
then
well
guarantee you
yeah,
that that triggered the download number because of the 60-second play and a 14 meg file. That means that's probably a
yeah.
14-minute show. So just the pre-caching alone would be enough to trigger. Now, this is this is not a popular thing, but I've said for a long, long time that the 1 minute threshold should be higher.
Mhm.
And that has gotten much scorn, and me needing to wear a bulletproof vest because the I think it should be 3 to 5 minutes of content before you count it as a download. But
Mm.
that's me. That's not the other 30 some companies that are involved in basically,
Well, I
fostering
think
management
yeah, I
guidelines.
think and Todd, I think you could take the position that that may be good for the advertising, side of podcasting as well, because, I mean, clearly the
So
first 3 minutes of an episode is highly prized by sponsors and advertisers.
I don't think I think what it really is, if you run the numbers, there's probably a financial impact. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I I think that is, a true, if you because it's very easy in our logarithm to flip the integer from
mhm,
60 seconds to 180,
yeah,
and you can see the delta, and I know
and the
what
numbers drop fast,
I
I would
know what
imagine.
I know what the delta is.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so there's lots of layers to this conversation, that's why I wanted to talk about it, is that it may appear, I mean, this kinda news broke on podnews.net, thank you, James Cridland, but,
Yeah.
this thing has many layers to it that I think podcasters need to understand and have comprehension of because it has implications for a lot of things.
Yeah.
And, it's very easy to do this, and it's also very easy to get into trouble with it, and I think from a platform perspective, it's a reoccurring thing, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it is because there is a history to this, and there is a history of impact and problems, that people have, but yet I do know that there's this underlying desire that some, engineers or programmers have or marketing people have that maybe the performance of the playback may benefit from a cache download type of a situation. I know this was the conversation that we had when I was talking to Facebook before they entered. I don't necessarily want to bring them up, but um, came into wanting to support podcasting was that they were concerned about playback performance on their platform. And so this may be maybe it was an accident, but maybe the intent really was to provide a better, more responsive playback experience. When that user hit the play button,
Right.
the show started playing right away.
Yeah, and there's not that delay. Now, Randy says, "I've learned to take all my stats with a grain of salt. I've noticed some weird things with my stats. I've noticed that when they're trying to get me to upgrade my plan." So what's interesting about that statement, Randy, is way we've worked our stats at Blueberry is
Mhm. Mhm.
as long as you're not running advertising, you're good.
Right.
We've got customers that
Doesn't
use
matter.
a lot of bandwidth.
Right. Right.
And, but if you start commercializing your show and you are on a flat rate plan, then I have a threshold that I look at and I say, okay, that
Mhm.
show's busted. And I don't use stats, I use bandwidth because I get a bandwidth report for each show. And you bust that little threshold, I'm going to go over and look at your show and say, oh, yeah, they're not running ads, and I go on with my day. But if they are running ads and they're become commercial, then I'll say, hey, we should have you on the pro plan.
Mhm.
The flat rate plans are designed for folks that are not commercial, not running advertising. And there's a fine line there between two, because what if the person's just promoting shirts in a show? Well, I'm not going to go. They're not going to count that as advertising. But if they're
Mhm.
running a HelloFresh ad, then that's kind of like the threshold that we set. And we give shows the options of going on programmatic too. So,
Yeah.
I think, but I've never asked someone to upgrade because of their stats number. I've asked them to upgrade because of their bandwidth usage. And again, probably in the
Yeah.
past 5 years, that's maybe 5 customers.
And I wanted to add one last little piece to this puzzle too for people to think about in regards to what's going on here is that each time this happens, it's another I don't know, chip out of the tree of the rationale for why we need to move beyond downloads, because this type of activity isn't going to happen in a stream. So this, you typically don't cache a stream, right? So it's
Well,
just
you
one of
you
those
can
things, right?
you can the difference between a stream and a progressive download is very narrow. So, this could happen in a stream too, because let's be frank, it's
Yeah,
still a physical media file.
yeah, but I think it's less likely.
I think it's more likely to happen as a stream.
Well, most streaming players don't necessarily cache, don't store anything. All they do is just play as it gets delivered to the player. So
But again, it's the same. I think you have a higher risk because in streaming platforms, they want the experience to be hit play, it goes. So I
Right.
bet you streaming platforms are caching. I bet they are.
I mean, I've done a lot of work with streaming platforms, and they typically only deliver what the limitations is because they're usually encoded in a variable bit rate type of a delivery or a fixed bit rate. So they're only going to deliver to the player at the bandwidth that it was set for it. And I don't know that there's a lot of these players out there. I think it's a good question, but
Yeah.
that actually cache the stream content. I think when the player closes up, all the content's gone. But as it comes in, it just gets consumed, but it doesn't get stored anywhere.
Again, from a technical standpoint, the difference because you're still serving physical. And this is the thing that's so bullshit. Said, "Oh, we want to go to streaming technology." Well, guess what? It's still a physical file sitting somewhere. It's not if you you are
Yeah,
not.
but it's not sitting locally. It's not sitting locally. It's only sitting in the server.
Yeah, just like now, your podcast media is sitting in a server.
Yeah, but
So
you can't download in the background a file that's streaming on a server. So it just
no, yes, you can absolutely.
that's unusual,
As
Todd.
soon as that
That's
page
unusual.
loads, that's got that URL link in there. Absolutely.
So what you're saying is when you stream an episode, true streaming, I'm not talking about
Mhm.
progressive download
No, we're
playback,
talking about the thing is you got to be
that
careful
they're
because
storing that episode because it transferred to the client player faster than the set bit rate of the
all I'm
stream.
saying is that stream that if you go for podcast, not what we're
Mhm,
doing right here,
mhm.
there is a physical media file somewhere that cannot be changed.
I know, but that's not what's being counted in a player, though.
Well, again,
So,
I think you'll have the same problem. I might be wrong, but I'm sure you'll have because it's all semantics at that point.
mm,
On
I think it's quite different, Todd.
I don't think so
Um, maybe
because
we should bring on a streaming expert
well, again,
to
if you
define this, but it can be done in a
but
variety of
remember,
different ways,
most
right?
streaming is not from fixed media. Streaming is live. When you talk to people who have radio shows, you join in progress. You don't join at the beginning of streaming programs. So
Okay.
that's the big difference here.
Well, there's live streams and there's on-demand streams.
Well,
Actually, I
okay.
got most of my audience from my early radio show from an on-demand stream.
So same thing.
So
There's a physical file sitting somewhere for
yeah,
the
but that's on the
audience.
server, not on the client. So what we're talking
Yeah,
about here
yeah, of course.
is a file that's being transferred as a download to the player device,
It's
which
a
is the
cache of
phone.
it's a cache of media is what it is, and it
Right,
looks
but
the same.
it's interpreted by by the serving server as the same thing as a complete file download.
I don't think so. I think streaming, when you hit stream, it's the same for podcast media, fixed podcast media. I might be wrong, but it's the same file.
Yeah, but
So,
it's not being transferred, it's being played to the player.
but still,
It's only delivering as much bandwidth as the server is
yeah,
configured to deliver.
yeah, I don't know
So,
about that. But anyway, let's hope we never go to that.
well, Todd, I used to run 2 streaming servers, one for Real Networks and one
Yeah, I know.
for Windows Media Server, and I had to go in and set the delivery bandwidth to the players. So if that was set at 32K or 64K or whatever it was, that's
Mhm.
all that was delivered to the player was exactly what that bandwidth was that was allocated for that media file. So it doesn't matter what it's encoded at and
Well, then
necessarily in the server.
well,
It's
Face
it
then when
plays at
if we go
right.
back to Facebook, all their stuff is streamed. So if they wanted to pre-cache
That's that's the same thing that, YouTube does too. So when you're streaming on YouTube like we are right now, that is truly a stream.
right,
It's being stored, as it comes in YouTube, as it's coming in, it's building
right,
a a streaming file on their servers that they
yep,
can be delivered on demand as a stream.
right.
And that's probably gonna be a variable bitrate stream because it could be a 4K stream, it could be an HD stream, or it can be a standard definition stream.
Well, I think when you
Yeah.
click play on YouTube, you don't get a delay. It starts playing immediately. So that tells me that
That's
they're caching.
well, that's the behavior of a streaming server, is that it's only gonna deliver it's gonna start playing instantaneously, as those bits come into the
Well,
player.
same thing with the audio file. So again,
Well, it's different because the download, it can download faster than the playback on a podcast download, right? So
well,
it's a progressive download,
but on
so
but
it
on
depends on how
YouTube
fast your bandwidth connection is.
but on
It'll
YouTube
deliver the whole media file, but it's only gonna play it at the bit rate that the media file's set at.
but YouTube does the same thing. I can have my internet go off and my YouTube video will play for 3 or 4 minutes before it shuts off. So they're doing something. Try it
Well, they're
sometime.
caching into the player is probably what they're doing. They're
Well,
caching, but it's not being stored.
anyway, we're
Yeah.
hopefully we don't switch.
Well, this is this is really at the core of the bigger conversation that continues to bubble out there around this conflict between the advertising industry increasingly wants podcasting to be a streaming delivery method because they get better metrics out of that, right? And why do they get better metrics out of it? Is because they can see when the stream stops and they can see when the stream ends, right? And they have an exact measurement on that because as the content's delivered to the player, there's a countdown clock there. And it's now granted, this can be done with podcasting too, but as you've said in the past, it's not as precise, right?
Right.
So, the client side can track it probably better than the server side. What's different here with the streaming with like a YouTube is that the server side sees that same data that you would get out of the player side. And so with the progressive download, you're not getting that data as accurate at the server side.
Well, anyway, we'll see what
Yeah.
happens.
Well, no, I think this is the conflict. I think podcasting is going to have to decide at some point, and I think these big platforms are going to push the issue, and I think it's already happening, that their advertisers are demanding to know much more accurate and detailed metrics about when their ads are heard,
Yeah,
right?
well, I don't know if they've, checked her lately or not, but I think it's all bullshit because they already have plenty of studies that says podcast advertising works better than, any other advertising. So I think they need to just get off on,
Mhm.
it's all about chasing the big dollars and not worrying about the average
Well, yeah.
podcaster out there.
Yeah, I think that is true. And these advertisers or these brands, or whatever, have gotten used to digital buying,
Yeah.
and that they're used to buying into streaming radio. They're used to buying streams on YouTube. They're used to buying it in this method, and then you throw into the mix downloads, and it complicates their
Oh,
decisions.
that was all solved when we changed the methodology from downloads to
Right.
plays.
Right. But we both know that's kind of BS as well. So,
Yeah,
right.
so everyone's
And that's
everyone's
part
got
of the
everyone's
that's
got
part of what I'm talking about.
everyone's
Right.
got plays now.
Right. Well, let's kind of move on and talk about what we saw this past week with Joe Rogan and Donald Trump and what that
Well,
means
first of
for
all,
a few things.
Have you seen all the discussion? Did you see that Rogan put that video up on X because Twitter, not Twitter, you could not
YouTube.
find the full video on YouTube. You could only find clips. So some
Okay.
monkey business was going on there.
Let's be more precise about that. What was actually happening was you did a search for Joe Rogan and Donald Trump in the search box.
Right.
You couldn't find it.
That's right.
So you had to go to actually Joe Rogan's experience channel on YouTube, and it was in the list of episodes that he had. But that
So-
was really the only way to find it.
So, something.
And he still got 40 million views.
And they go, makes you go, 40 million views, and it couldn't be found by search.
Right.
Nothing.
Can you imagine how many views he would have had if it would have come up in search?
Think about the monkey business that's being. Who's stepping on the scales over there?
Well, I think we know who, right? It's Google, right?
Right.
So, but looking at the big picture of this,
Oh yeah, amazing.
Donald Trump going on podcasts, just the ones prior to this Joe Rogan conversation has generated almost 24 million views on Donald Trump being on a variety of big podcasters. I mean, like he's been on I think it's the second largest and the third largest podcast on Spotify, the Sean Ryan Show and the Theo Vaughn podcast.
And here's the thing that I think is my point I made on Twitter was Rogan streamed that show, right? Was it streamed? Does he stream those interviews?
No, it's not a live show. It's not a live show. It's totally recorded and then published into Spotify and into YouTube and into his podcast feed.
So the question is, did he edit? And with a 3-hour program,
I don't think so.
think he edited it all. Now,
I think he's got too much integrity to do that kind of stuff.
So was Call Her Daddy or whatever that show that had Kamala? Am I pronouncing that right? Because I don't want to get yelled at here.
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Did they edit that interview?
I couldn't answer that one precisely either, but
so I think this is where there's an opportunity here. You look at the controversy that came out of 60 Minutes replacing an answer with another interview, doing a swaparoo.
Now we're talking about mainstream media and how
we're talking about mainstream media,
right.
So if podcast really want to throw a continual wrench into old media, we're going to call them old media today. What would be real interesting is for a show like Rogan, a show like Call Her Daddy, and whatever, where Theo Vaughn or whatever, it would be nice to have a running a clock. Of course, they could change the clock, but it'd be nice to have a running clock or something in there that would prove that there was no, or disclaimer that there was no editing done on the interview. So that us as consumers of the content, whatever political side you're on, know if you have gotten the full context of an interview without any monkey business being done in removing words. It's harder to edit video and make it look smooth. Audio, very, very simple. Matter of fact, I did it on my show the other day. I forgot to hit record for the first 2 minutes of my podcast. So I had to re-record the first 2 minutes. So I think what we have here is a situation where trust in media, going back to podcasting, is going to be a linchpin here, because we can't trust. It doesn't matter if you're Fox, CBS, ABC, NBC, MSNBC. It doesn't matter what alphabet soup you watch on mainstream or old stream media. They can edit and take sound bites, and you don't get the full context. So I think context in this day and age is incredibly important, because you can take anything that we say here and take a 15-second soundbite of that and make us sound like the most horrible monsters in the whole world if you don't have the full context of something. So it's not that extreme, but you get what I'm saying. They've done this repeatedly,
Yeah.
to fit their narrative. So if you have a unedited Theo Von Call Her Daddy, is that the show? Call Her Daddy?
Oh, yeah, as far as the
Yeah,
the
and
show that Kamala did, right.
yeah, and then Rogan, and now Vance is gonna go on. These unedited will actually show you what you really wanna know about a candidate.
Yeah, I don't let's be I'm gonna pull it back a little bit on saying unedited. I do think that the Joe Rogan podcast, probably maybe has some edits in it, but it's important to think about the context of what the edits are, right? If they're editing for the beginning and the end and
Right,
maybe editing for gaps in their content or whatever, so
or a
let's
break
say
or whatever.
yeah, let's say Joe had to go to the bathroom or something, um, it's okay to edit that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah,
But it's not okay if you're editing to change what
narrative.
Donald Trump said or to change the question that Joe Rogan said, which
Mhm.
sometimes this is what has gotten out of control out there in the political realm is when people take snippets from
Yep.
a conversation and reinterpret it as something unintended on
Yeah.
the part of the person saying it because they didn't take the full context of it. That's the real danger of this. But it gets back to this, Todd, that all the research is showing that the trust in podcasts is so much higher than mainstream media right now because of the authentic conversations,
Yeah.
the 3-hour chats,
A
right?
3 hour,
So, yeah, and
even
do
if they
we
do
trust Joe Rogan is the question.
even if they do edit, it's 3 hours,
It's still 3 hours, right? Yeah.
but again,
Yeah.
if they haven't edited, then
Yeah.
you get to see the beginning, the middle, and the end,
Yeah.
and all the superfluous interactions that happen from a question to an answer, not the 15-second soundbite.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it doesn't matter which candidate, but obviously we've seen this be weaponized in a big way against Trump in a big way, and
Mhm.
maybe to Kamala too. They've
Mhm.
taken sound bites from her that
Oh,
you're like,
yeah. Sure they have.
what
Sure.
is this word soup? But maybe we didn't hear the beginning and the end,
Yeah.
and maybe the perspective would be different if we heard the beginning and the end and not just the sound bite. The news cycles can't go for 3 hours because, they're on a 30-minute news cycle. So
Yeah, and it could be taken advantage. I mean, a lot of voters are fairly low information
yeah,
voters, right? So, this concept of, snapshots and sound bites is certainly an important, factor in a political campaign.
so I was watching the Facebook and TikTok responses this because I was generally very curious what
Mhm.
if it would cause
Mhm.
people to flip. Now, there were some people that said, "Oh, now I'm voting for him," and, "Oh, no, I'm not." So there was definitely people, um, changed their minds. And I think
Mhm.
that's the key here in having the ability to, again, not just hear a soundbite, but hear the beginning, middle, the end, the full story. Um,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah, that's important.
I listened to the 3 hours, and there was a few
Mhm.
things in there I was like, "Wow." And,
Of course.
the same thing with, and I listened to the other interview as well, and I was like, Okay." But,
Yeah.
again, I don't know on Call Her Daddy if they edited it or not. Um, I'm suspicious that they may have, but they may not have. But I think it would be good for all of those podcasters to come out and say, "Yeah, we didn't edit.
Right.
A
Right.
AKA, we didn't edit the context of the beginning, middle,
Yeah.
we got
Yeah,
the full."
it's the editing of the context of the conversation.
Right.
One other piece of this that we haven't talked about, which maybe draws some interesting, contextual correlation around the distribution of content like this right now is that the numbers that I've seen as of October 26th was that the Rogan, audio podcasts got 3.1 million downloads.
Mm,
I don't know what the total number is today. It's a few days past that. But Twitter X got 18 million views of the same media file, but
yeah,
that's
I
a
was I
video.
was I was gonna load it here and
So
look.
you and then 40 million views on YouTube.
Yeah.
And you kind of, you paint the picture. And I've I've said this before on this podcast, was it Stephen Bartlett from the CEO of a podcast, the CEO of a Diary of a CEO podcast,
Mhm.
um, we commented at Podcast Movement that he felt that podcasting felt small. And so I guess if you put it on the context of what I'm seeing here with the Joe Rogan numbers, let's just give Joe Rogan the benefit of a doubt on his audio podcast that maybe he had 5 million
Mhm.
downloads of his audio podcasts, but yet he had 18 million views of the full episode on X and 40 million views on YouTube. What does that say about the media landscape right now around the same content, right?
Well, let me do a do me
Where's the scale?
well, how many people watch CNN primetime? In the 8 to 11 PM, CNN average 893,000 among the 25 to 54 and 3.463 million among P2. So, P2 plus, whatever that is. That was CNN's strongest Monday through Thursday primetime performance since the week of the presidential Biden inauguration.
Mhm.
So, so 3 point, let's say CNN 4.2 million. And that's again people that come in and come out between 8 and 11. Now let's look at Fox.
So what you're talking about is the prime time viewership of CNN from 4 to 8
Yeah.
PM. Is that what you're saying?
So
Eastern?
yeah, so Fox News averaged a little bit different time here. Fox in total, Fox News averaged 1.43 viewership, increasing year to year, and 194,000 plus 48. In prime time, Fox News garnered 2.5 million viewers and 320. So about the same number. Although I think when they look at the real rankings, Fox is killing CNN hand over foot uh,
Mhm.
in whatever their ratings. When they actually do the Nielsen ratings or whatever. MSNBC. How many people watch MSNBC prime time?
Oh, it's probably
Uh,
dramatically less.
A 1.4. Oh, here's it is. Primetime Fox 2.5, MSNBC 1.4.
Mhm.
Um, Kind of a breakdown. I wonder if they've got more here. Who has more viewers, CNN or MSNBC? CNN ranked ahead of MSNBC. Which news station has the most? Fox has the most on 24-hour period coverage. So yeah, so looks to me like Rogan kicked their ass.
Well, yeah, I would say that's I mean, Joe Rogan got more audience out of his audio podcast than probably all those networks combined.
Right. And then
So and that's not even counting the action that's happening on Facebook and YouTube and X. Um, and if you total all that stuff up, you're talking, close to 100 million views, which these networks are not even anywhere near that.
so again,
So,
Rogan is an outlier. He is a big name, but he is pulling numbers bigger than old media. Randy says people out there will chop up that for Trump memes all over the net. It is getting hard with AI and like 11 Labs to know who is the who is true or fake. That's true.
yeah, it's true. But it wasn't just Joe Rogan that got these
Right,
kind of
right.
numbers.
Leo
There
Bond,
was Theo Vaughn. There was
David.
what was the other one? Sean Ryan and Lex Friedman is pulling in huge numbers too, and that totaled up almost 24 million
So
views.
I saw a clip on YouTube. Now, was it Sean Ryan? No, yeah, maybe it was. Let me go look at this guy. Yeah, I really like Sean Ryan. I follow
Oh, I
him.
do too. I think he's terrific. Yeah.
He does a lot of military SEALs, CIA type of interviews. I really like his interviews. He
Hmm.
made a comment, Facebook short that basically said, "Hey, this is a monumental event." And I think
Yeah,
if you
I agree.
r- think about where we are in the world today and the trust, I'm sure you're having a heyday with this over on Trust Factor, but it's a situation where, um, well, no one trusts mainstream media. It doesn't matter which channel.
Mm.
You might be
No,
a
'cause
diehard
they've picked sides.
Yeah, you might be a diehard Fox or CNN or MSNBC or Rachel Maddow or whoever
Yeah.
whatever your flavor is, and we don't care here. But don't you want the whole story?
Well, Todd, that's a much bigger existential question, right? What's the landscape going forward? Is the age or the era of a bipartisan, nonpartisan media gone?
Well,
I
first of
think
all,
it is.
there's no
I think
partisan
it's
media
mostly gone.
anymore. It's nonpartisan media,
Well, no,
and
no, it's partisan media, not
oh, yeah, partisan, yeah,
nonpartisan
yeah,
media.
pardon, yeah,
Right,
that's
right.
right. There's no
Yeah.
nonpartisan media.
Yeah. So it's and because frankly, I don't know that you're gonna build audience these days if you're not partisan.
So, what would be really interesting here, and let's be just straight up honest.
Mhm.
If Kamala went on Rogan and did 3 hours, if she did 3 hours, if she did the equivalent of what
Yeah,
former President Trump did, this would be the true, because then we could see the questions Rogan was asking.
yeah.
Because you look at the questions he asked, former President Trump, some of those were very, very hard questions. No
Mhm.
softballs. There was no softball pitches that were going on there. If you listen to it, most people, "Oh, I've listened." They listen to a soundbite. But I challenge people,
Right.
if she does go on, and I think the chances of that is 0. I don't think she's gonna go on for 3 hours. I just
I think
don't.
it's too big of a risk for her, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
she might go
yeah,
on the day after the election if she wins, but she's not gonna go on before the election. I just don't think so.
yeah, I did see an online poll on X that, Joe Rogan put out saying, "Should I have Kamala Harris on the podcast, yes or no?" And I did see in there that the results were showing over 60% yes.
But the but still 40% of people said
Said
no.
no, right?
So why are they saying
But that could be very similar with Donald Trump too, right?
right?
It could be the same thing,
But
so
it would be awesome then to have a side by side comparison and look at the interview questions and figure out, okay, did the hard questions get answered? Did softball questions get thrown out? Was there a parity in treating the candidate the same?
mhm, mhm.
I think with Rogan we would have close to parity. But,
Yeah.
the history has already shown that even on some of when I watched the Call Her Daddy, those were some pretty softball questions that she got. She weren't as
I would
hard.
imagine a lot of the talking points were probably pre-agreed to with that particular
Well,
production.
then they should it'd be nice to have them disclose that.
Well,
If
because I've heard that Joe Biden does that with the interviews. Well, they'll talk to the host of whoever's doing the interview, and they'll agree to a list of questions.
Yeah, I'm sure,
Um,
how could
right.
that not happen even with former President Trump? Do you think
I
they do that?
I don't think well, that this I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't know
just saying
either.
that I don't get a sense that anything was agreed to on topics, but I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm not behind the scenes on
But
that.
again, I think this is all part of would be important disclosure as we move out of, whatever's gonna happen in elections, whatever's gonna happen in the election, but as
Yeah,
we move out of this into the next season, I think
yeah.
there's some things here that could come out of this where, Rogan could say, listen, hey, he didn't get advanced access to the questions.
Mhm.
There was no editing of the question beginning, middle, and end of the if we did editing, this is what we did. Um, I'm sure people in the space have went through that video with a fine-tooth comb, looking for a
Mhm.
way to put
Oh, yeah.
pinholes in Rogan's commentary. So for his aspect, I'm 95% sure there was no editing done.
Yeah.
Just because there's political mileage and being able to say, "See, at 3 minutes and 82 3 minutes and 82 3 minutes and 32 seconds, there was a glitch,
Mhm.
it's a cut. What happened? Why was there a cut?" Um, so I don't know. I think there's an opportunity here for podcasting to truly, truly, truly be the new media and the trustworthy source of all content when it doesn't matter presidential or whatever.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that, as kind of a backdrop to this for the Joe Rogan kind of situation is that he's got about 15 million Spotify followers right now. And that podcast is available in a video form and an audio form. So you can take your pick, right? And he has 17.5 million YouTube subscribers. So it doesn't say anything in here about um, how many Apple followers that he has.
Yeah,
Or but it says on Spotify. That's because he's hosted on Spotify and he's a partner of Spotify.
they're not
And
gonna talk
I
about Apple numbers.
I kind of wonder how much of that interview with Donald Trump, in the back of Joe's mind, thought about his relationship with Spotify. Um, because if I think about the history of him being on that platform, is that there has been times when he's been very controversial
Mhm.
on that platform, and Spotify was, you know, having some second thoughts.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago. It was only a couple of years ago that this happened. And maybe wouldn't have been renewed or something. I mean, I kind of felt that tension, right? Back especially during the pandemic time frame. So I do kind of wonder if Joe has to kind of like hold back on some things and maybe not talk about certain issues because I think he did get some heat for not challenging Donald Trump about the whole COVID vaccine and that kind of stuff.
Mm.
So I don't I just wonder if he has to kind of couch his questions and his conversation keeping in mind that his platform is who they are, right? And what their values are.
Well, that's a good question. The only way we're ever gonna know that is if Joe leaves Spotify, and then
Yeah.
those stories will come out, maybe, depending on the exit NDA he has, but he's under contract right now, so we'll never know.
Yeah, because I did hear him say at the very beginning of the interview that he wanted to talk about this subject, but he couldn't play certain things on the screen because YouTube would ban
Oh,
him or block him, right?
yeah,
So he said that at the very beginning of the program,
yeah.
um, which I thought was interesting. But this gets back into our earlier conversation about like brand safety and these tools where content creators have to censor themselves around what they say and what they can't say, the questions that they ask, the
If
topics that they cover, because they're concerned about monetization and takedowns.
yeah, if they're on a platform that does
That
that.
does that, right? Which a lot of the platforms do.
Well, be honest with you, I had plenty of other things to do I could have done for 3 hours. Um,
I think all of us are that's the case. Yeah.
and I wanted to
Um,
be able to and the reason I wanted to watch it versus listen to it in this
mhm.
regard was I was looking for those cuts,
Yeah, there's body language stuff that you can pick up in the video.
and I was looking for edits, and I was looking for
Well, that too,
things,
yeah.
and so from that regard, that's the reason I want and normally I would just listen to Rogan. When I
Yeah.
do, and if he has a guest that is coming on. But here, if you think about this, this was a incredibly strategic move by the Trump campaign and being on Rogan. And now that his running mate is going to be on, um, that shows you. at least in my opinion, that they want the hard questions and they want to be challenged. And whether you like it or not, you can then make your own judgment on the responses. No, no one when he does his rallies, and
Yeah,
all of them, and even Kamala, they do run the same playbook, same script,
mostly, right, right,
same
mostly.
things. It's just a
Mhm.
rinse, wash, repeat, different city.
Yeah,
So, unless he says something outlandish or she says something outlandish
yeah, if
or
there's something in the news that's happening at that time,
right,
whatever, right.
then they'll pick up a segment. So, what you see in the rallies is the same sound bites again and again and again that make it through TikTok and all the other places.
Yeah.
And that's not what I wanna hear.
No, that's true. I mean, and that's what's great about them doing these long form podcasts. And there's another piece of this too, is that one of the problems that we see in the media landscape, especially around politics right now, is each side doesn't really want to listen to the other side,
Oh,
right?
no.
They they focus on getting sound bites about what
Yeah,
the other side says,
yeah.
right? And so nobody's really listening to the whole conversation, really, of any of these candidates on the opposite side.
Right, right. Yeah.
So those that are in favor of Donald Trump probably never listen to the entire Kamala Harris conversations on the interviews that she does,
Right, right.
and inverse the Democrat side of the fence probably never listens to the entire conversation that Donald Trump's because they're so repulsed by him, right?
And they
They
can't
can't
handle
handle it.
it. Yeah,
Right. Right.
they wanna, you know yeah.
Right. But it's so important for people, and I've been saying this for a long time, is that it's so important for all of us as voters in the United States of America to actually listen to both of these people talk in long form conversations and really get to know them, not just rely on sound bites that comes from the mainstream media. Get into the details
Now
of this.
here's
But people aren't willing to do that though.
I'm gonna take a little different approach.
Yeah.
We kinda know what we're getting with these 2 candidates. It's
Well,
kinda
some
known,
more know more than others, right?
and some people
Yeah.
know whatever they've heard. But in the real nitty-gritty, if we want real change to happen, senators, House of Representatives, local state legislatures, your county commission, all these people that are on things that do really affect you besides taxes and the
Yeah.
debt and everything else, your local zoning. This is where we need more because I went to vote, Rob. I got my absentee ballot, and
I've already voted too. Yeah.
and I'm asking my sister, "What's the story on this candidate? I don't know who they are. I don't know what they do. I don't know if I
Yeah.
should vote for the Republican or the Democrat or the Independent." I said, "I have nary a clue."
Especially in the local races.
Yeah,
I
so
agree with you.
I'm like, and she's kinda tuned in, so she gave me her opinion, and, and to be honest with you, I took her advice and picked the candidate she suggested because I trust her, but
Mhm.
if I didn't have someone to reach out to, I would have had to if I really cared, I would have had to went online, found their website, tried to sort through their BS sound bites and figured out, okay, what is this person?
Right.
If we could actually have I would sit through 5 or 6 hours of content to hear the presidential candidates, the senators, the House of Representatives.
Mhm.
I would listen to the local candidate and really know who I'm voting for.
Yeah.
My, situation happened, it's been probably 10 or 15 years. I was still living in Hawaii, and, Hawaii's I mean, it's hardcore. I think there's one token Republican in the whole state,
Right. Right.
and, it was a 4th of July, event, and I was hanging out with, family members and, the part one of our, uh, relatives who's now just a matter of fact, I just went to his funeral when I was in Hawaii. Him and I were sitting there talking, and, in walks the politicians, right?
Mhm.
And, the question was asked, "Where did you go to high school?" And no no real substantive questions. So Todd, of course, I don't care what high school you went to in Hawaii. That's a thing. And so I asked the candidate 3 or 4 things about its issues in Hawaii, and he responded. And I didn't know until later that the guy was a Republican. And so, I'm kind of on my phone, and then, of course, my uncle's like, "Wow, I really like him. He's those are great questions, and you get great responses." And I said, "Uncle," I said, who do you normally vote?" "Oh, I always vote straight ticket, Democrat."
Oh, right.
And I said, "You realize
Straight
he,"
down the line, right,
and
or
I
across,
yeah,
right.
and I said, "You realize he was a Republican?" And
Mhm.
I kinda got this, "Eh?" kind of he had this, like, moment where he was like, I could tell that there was a shift. Now, he may have still voted straight Democrat, but at least set a flag in
Mhm.
his head. And I didn't know when the guy came in the tent because he didn't say, I'm running for such and such district and blah, blah, blah. And so for me, it just tells me that people really don't know who their candidates are. They don't know their issues. They don't know what they stand for. And if we did, this country would be a hell of a lot different.
Yeah, I actually registered in the state of Connecticut as unaffiliated. So I didn't designate a party. I don't really believe in that. I don't
I don't know if
believe
you
that
have to
we should be put in these silos to say, "Well, you're a Democrat or you're a
yeah,
Republican."
yeah. I don't think
I'm an
in Michigan you
American,
have
so
to declare.
that's why I register as unaffiliated because I wanna be able to pick the
Yeah.
people by who they are.
I don't think in Michigan I have to declare which party I'm part of.
Some of
I
the states actually require that because one of the reasons is because of the primaries tend to be either Republican or Democrat, and
Oh, yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
they happen at different times of the year, so
yeah.
those people need to be identified, I guess.
So we didn't wanna turn this into a political show, but I think the
No.
the the importance
Well,
here
what's the
is,
mapping back to podcasting then
yeah, the mapping
in right,
is there needs to be more of this.
right.
And,
Well,
we need to have the ability to be educated on, who's gonna represent us and, run up the debt or, spend more money on defense or whatever you want or don't want. You should have that education. Say, "Okay, I don't want this person because."
right. And and I think it's also safe to say that, mainstream media could do this too, but the
They could,
problem
but
is
they
that
don't.
they've lost trust.
No,
They've
no.
lost the trust of
Yeah,
their audience, and their audience is going to where they feel like they can trust to get more authentic and real conversations. I mean, of all the people that could be doing this, it's mainstream media because they have the reach, they have the ability, they have the reputation from the past, not so much in the present, but they could be doing this too. I
I
mean, they could be doing interviews like this that reach this kind of scale, but nobody trusts them.
I think the part of the issue is, as well, is when they are accused of being biased, they say, "Oh, no, we're not. We're not biased. We give fair and equal
Right.
coverage." But there's so much inside the tent, they can't
Yeah.
see beyond the horizon of what they're involved in. Where the rest of us see this big picture and like, "Oh, yeah, they're just it should
Yeah.
be, DNCNBC." Yeah, yeah.
Right.
You know?
Well, I think
Or
that all
or
all all these big networks have made a mistake by being a network that puts on a debate. I I think it's been just a blunder on their part because what we've seen them do is expose themselves as being
yeah, yeah,
biased
yeah.
in a significant way. I liked it in the past, and because we used to have a bipartisan or an unpartisan, election debate committee,
Oh, I
right?
don't remember that.
That used to put these debates on, and they hired an independent video production company to come in and create a video feed out of that event. That's how it used to be done.
Hmm.
Now, what's being done is it's being earmarked to be it's going to be a CNN debate or it's going to be an ABC News debate. And if those networks are biased, and they come into it and give the impression that they're biased, then that's going to taint them as an untrustworthy
Right.
news organization. So I think that these debates should be put on in an unaffiliated and unbiased organization.
Can you imagine having Rogan doing the debate and having both candidates in separate rooms where they can't see each other or hear each other?
Mhm.
And
Well, yeah, and bring Joe Rogan in, bring, a representative of across the board
yeah,
media out there from the independent side.
and have them in separate rooms where they,
Right.
again, can't hear each other, and they'll say, "Okay, here's the question," and one candidate gets the question, and the other and you can't they can't rebuttal because they haven't heard each other. I think that would be a really that would be a debate I would actually watch. It
But
would make
that's not really a debate though,
a
Todd. You're
debate.
siloing them so much where there's no dynamic
Well,
between them, and that's kind
that's
of the whole point.
well, then
Yeah.
I guess it's not called a debate. It's a, you know,
It's just an
it's a
interview at that
interview,
point.
right? They both get the
Right.
same question.
Right. But I think bringing in people that are not affiliated
Yeah,
with
yeah, yeah.
what the population has associated with as a biased one side or the other network,
So
is key.
as the podcast listeners are out there,
Mhm.
do you see an opportunity here, for the ability
Well, we've talked about local podcasting
yeah,
for years, or actually, especially in the last couple of weeks, we've been
and
talking about it.
the challenge
Right.
is no one would have went on Rogan unless he had as big of an audience as he has. So that'll be another thing. It's a economy of
Well,
scale. So can you get a local politician to go on a local show that may have a small local audience? They may not find it worth their time.
it
So
just depends if it's a local candidate for, like, the state house or the state
right,
senate or something like that. Um, you're right. That's why there needs to be some local, state level, city level podcasts that are
yeah,
out there that reach a large percentage of the
yeah,
population for them to do it. I
yeah.
I I agree with you, and I think to some degree those exist, but not at the level that really needs to happen.
'Cause I
Yeah.
think it would make a big difference because, most people are so disenfranchised with the election process at this point. It's kinda interesting, being overseas at this time because I'm getting questions, like, from people that are here and expats from other countries, and the basic question is what the beep is going on in America?
Right.
That's the question I keep getting asked. Say, "What the" "Have you guys went insane?" And it's not just about the politics, it's everything. And, it's curious. It's curious to see this external feedback, and, what's even more interesting is they'll be very vocal to tell me who they think should be president.
Mhm.
Um, and I'll say that based on the conversations I've been having, Kamala better be happy that they can't vote because the majority of people that I run into, they don't know the nuances. They just see the personality. And
I did see that, Arnold Schwarzenegger came out today with a public post endorsing, Kamala Harris.
well, that's not surprising because,
Well,
well,
he's a
maybe
former Republican
that's true.
governor of California, right?
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
again, but again, it is curious to hear the commentary, at least locally. And I don't like
Yeah,
to talk politics. Matter of fact, being a visitor in the Philippines, um,
yeah.
you shall never talk about local politics.
Really?
It's
Wow.
you
It's
stay
a
out of
taboo thing. It's a
stay out
taboo
of
thing?
especially if you're a creator, stay out of their business. Don't talk about their
Oh,
policies. Don't don't because most people are going to not necessarily always have positive things to say, and it can get people in
right.
trouble. So, and there's a lot of YouTubers here that are on the borderline, and I'm like, "Why? Why go on the borderline?" And it's their country, they are
Right.
gonna do what they're gonna do, stay the hell out of it. Um,
And I think that the reason we're talking about it tonight is that we're just seeing such a big impact
Yeah.
on politics right now, that is rooted in independent created media,
Yeah.
and that includes podcasting. But I think it's an interesting, maybe we've crossed over a threshold here, Todd, where this medium that we call podcasting and new media and YouTube, or it depends on how much of an inclusion that you want to have here, has really taken over the mantle of being the mainstream media now, right? People have voted with their eyes and their ears.
Yeah. How many
Safe to say.
if you had 300 how many what is the population of the United States right now? 300 some
365 million or something like that.
population of USA. Let's see here. 335 million people.
335 million.
And
Okay.
so Rogan has had 36 million views on
40.
his
Just
40
on YouTube.
so he has reached 10% of well, of course, there's probably I'd like to see that breakdown. How much of that is US and how much of that is foreign from a
Yeah,
listener
that's
standpoint.
true.
But I
That's
would
true.
say probably he's reached at least 10% of the electorate.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, if you look at the 18 million views on Twitter X, between just those two is 60 million. And then you add up the almost 25 million that were on other podcasts that Donald Trump has been on. And,
And then
I mean, you're getting some serious numbers.
what was the numbers that she did on Call Her Daddy?
I've never seen those numbers, so I don't know. I don't know.
That would be the number I'd want to see.
I
But
I can't imagine that one hit this much.
I would think it would be at
But
least 1 million or more, but it's hard to
oh,
say.
yeah. 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 Well,
Some
I
of
think
those
we
of
could probably
those
go find
call
out if you, look it up in YouTube to find, that conversation. There's gonna be a view count that's gonna be underneath that. Now, granted, we're not gonna know what the interview on the audio podcast was, but, you know
let's see here. It's Spotify. Again, let me look for YouTube. Again, I can't find it. It's not in the search results. So, oh, here we
mm,
go. Call Her Daddy. All right. See, okay, 744,000 views.
on
Not,
YouTube.
not even 1 million. Wow.
Well, yeah.
So, in that regard, then, Rogan, man, he knocked it out of the ballpark, didn't he? If you can reach 10% of the US population,
Just in one interview?
that's
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 I mean,
that's incredible.
yeah. I
But it wasn't
If that's what he did. I mean, there was a lot of people that probably consume that from other countries around the world too.
yeah, but still, let's say 5%.
Mhm.
That's a creator's dream to reach that many people.
Yeah, and the cable mainstream media is not getting anywhere close to that.
And it wasn't on new and trending on YouTube either.
No, of course not. No.
There was some, I saw some TikTok video about what was trending at the same time, and people were laughing about, it's just bullshit stuff. It was, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
It's
Again,
called thumb on the scale, right?
yeah, we're trying to give a good perspective here, everyone. So don't get mad at us. We're just telling the numbers that we see.
Yeah. Well, the numbers tell a story. That's why
Oh, I hope
numbers can really tell
I
what's
hope she
happening.
goes on. I hope she agrees to come and go on.
I do too.
She's got some time. Time is running short.
Yeah, I
Now
would
today
say
is
that's true.
Wednesday, so I would say for it to be effective, it'd either have to be Thursday or Friday at a minimum. It's not gonna
Yeah.
swing the needle on a Monday for sure, because half the population's already pre-voted, so
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think the last number I saw was over 50 million people have already voted. So, yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
and they keep throwing more and more names, non-citizens off of various voter lists around the country. I see.
Well,
So,
to be
uh,
fair, that Supreme Court ruling only affected 1,600 people in one state. So I don't want to add to the hype of voter fraud and all this other stuff, but it is nice to see that they were able, at least one state was able to remove
yeah,
non-citizens. Now, again, some states allow non-citizens to vote on local issues.
yeah.
Um, and again, I've got a pretty strong opinion on that. I think it should be,
Well, it's a
uh,
federal law that you have to have ID, right?
well, no, no, not at all. It's state by states decide on ID.
Oh, I thought it was a federal law.
California, it's
Yeah.
against the law to ask for an ID. Uh,
Oh,
now, so some states don't. State by state decides on. I think it should be a federal law that you have to show ID, or
hmm
some have a way to prove if you don't have ID that you are who you say you are. There's very few people that don't have a social security number. But again, social
or
security,
have some sort of a state
yeah,
ID because the state requires it. I mean, you can't even do anything without a state ID, right?
social security numbers though can be issued to non-citizens too. So, but I don't know if there's a way to flag who is and who isn't. And the
Yeah.
reason I know that is Shoko had a social security number when she worked for duty free in Saipan when she was just
Mhm.
19. And
Mhm.
when she moved to the United States and we got married and then we did the immigration thing, her social security number didn't change. It carried over from when she was in Saipan. I was astounded. I didn't realize, and there was no special provisions on the social security card at all. She just got a number. So, and she didn't
Yeah.
know that she'd paid social security taxes in as a non-citizen. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
I'm sure
curious.
that happens. Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
sure that happens. The IRS still wants to collect their income tax.
Well,
They don't care too much about.
someone paid social security on
Yeah.
my income. I basically, someone was using my social security number for a while and paying social security taxes on it.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. I had social security being paid on my social security number from another source. Someone used my, and it caused some tax issues. So they cleared it up, but for 2 or 3 years, someone had gotten a hold of my social security number and was specifically paying social security. So I'm sure someone got a job somewhere and, luck one in a million. I was the number they came up with. And
Or was it, did this person have the same name that you have? And maybe they
well,
got confused.
who knows? No, I don't think so. And I
I don't
don't
think so.
know. This
Yeah.
was this was in the 80s. So,
It's
um,
just it seems odd that somebody would pay Social Security taxes or taxes
well,
on the behalf of somebody else,
yeah,
right?
well, I've heard it's happened more than once, but
Yeah.
again, in those early '80s, maybe the systems weren't complicated enough to do that matching. They just came in on a number or whatever. Who knows?
Yeah.
You think there would have been an ABC matching, but yeah. So yeah, I actually have still on my Social Security record some credit for income that I didn't actually earn.
Mm. Wow. That's I've never had that happen to me. I guess
No,
I've been lucky.
but
Yeah.
all
Well, it's
right.
gonna be interesting here in the next week to see
Yeah.
what happens,
Oh, yeah.
I think it's gonna be a bumpy ride would be my projection here. I don't think it's gonna go smooth.
Well, I don't think we'll know on Tuesday. We'll probably not know until the weekend.
It's probably gonna
So
be at least a few days afterwards before
and
we know.
then all the lawsuits that each side throws, and it's amazing how other countries can do it all in a day. They vote and they report and they have everything done in a day, and they require in-person voting with an ID. I've been in countries before where they put um, it's either on the hand or on the head. They put
Well,
uh,
like a mark?
they mark you if you voted. And so that way that stops you from it doesn't wash off for 2 or 3 days. I don't know if it's on the hand or on the I can't remember where, but that's how they ensure that you haven't voted twice.
Yeah, I think I've seen pictures of, people in other countries that have voted is that their fingers are
Oh, maybe their
colored.
finger. Yeah, their
Right,
finger has got
right.
color put on it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
can't
it's like they have to dye their finger
Yeah,
that
yeah,
proves, so if they
proves
voted again, that
yeah,
could be tracked
yeah,
somehow.
yeah. It's something that doesn't wash off for 2 or 3 days, so,
Yeah,
uh, can you imagine Americans being asked, "Put your hand in this green ink?"
that's right. Very barbaric, right?
There would be lawsuits abound,
Yeah,
I got
right.
them traumatized
Yeah.
because now people know I voted.
Paper ballots, right? I mean, that's how I voted. I voted on a paper ballot here in
Yeah,
Connecticut.
me too, on my
I
absentee ballot.
I early voted. Actually, I went into a polling location
Oh,
and
okay.
actually voted in a polling location in a little cubicle thing, right?
And it printed out
And
your ballot,
they didn't
right?
print it out. It was actually right. I used a pen and ink on a ballot that had my
Oh,
name
oh,
associated with it, and I put it into an envelope, and I brought it over to there's a person working
yeah, the scanning
a
machine.
desk there that no, they didn't scan it. They just took the envelope from me. I sealed the envelope with the
Mm,
ballot inside
oh,
of it,
okay.
and they dropped it into a bin and said, "This will be counted on, November 5th."
Oh, the way when I voted in the primary, of course, it was on election day,
Mhm.
the machine I used was digital, but it printed out the
Yeah, I
ballot.
know some systems do it that
Yeah,
way,
and then
right?
it scanned, and they only had one of those machines. Everyone else was printing on paper ballots, so it was kinda weird.
I think I've also heard that some of those machines will, have been, seen to print the wrong selections out,
My
but thank goodness that the voter can see what that
yeah,
printout was before
my
they turn it in.
my sister is, the county clerk for our town or she's the clerk, excuse me,
Mhm.
township clerk. So
Yeah,
she runs the voting in our township, and of course, I was asking her 82 questions on, how they validate the machine, and she
yeah,
says, "Oh, yeah," she says, like, I think the day before there's a process that they run, like, 30 or 40 ballots through this thing and mismarked ballots and making sure
and
the
then
machine is calibrated, so,
properly to
yeah.
credit the right
Yeah,
people with the
yeah,
votes, right, right.
so and she says if the machine throws an error, she says all those ballots come out and have to be hand counted. I'm like, "Oh my god." So,
Wow,
yeah,
okay, yeah.
and it's a small township, so it wouldn't be probably 6, 7, maybe 800 people, so not an unsurmountable task, but I think
Yeah,
that's
I don't
why
think there's any way to game a paper ballot that has ink on it, right,
no,
versus trying to do it in a voting machine and have it
yeah,
output something. I think
but
there's a risk factor there.
I guarantee your ballot is going to be scanned after that ballot that
Oh,
you
it will be, right,
yeah,
right.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. So eventually it's gonna be scanned anyway. There's not a person there counting and marking a note
yeah,
on a piece of paper
yeah,
saying
yeah, they're not making
right,
a
yeah.
tally.
I have to count,
There's
like
another
with the
5.
slash
Click,
through
click.
it, that's 5, that's 10, right, yeah.
All right, everybody, go vote, if you haven't voted, and we'd love to hear your feedback on what you think all this means for podcasting, and,
Yeah. Well, local podcasts are the key to all of us being better informed about the candidates
yeah,
and
don't do
podcasts
like
in
I did,
general.
has to ask my sister about local candidates, and
Yeah,
then
and I
you
think we also have to ask the question, at some point during this path, do we think that the mainstream or cable media will learn their lesson, right?
no,
And
not until they're broke.
which means that the path that they're on is to complete destruction
Yeah.
and lack of relevancy over a period of time, which means that podcasting and new media and these platforms will continue in their escalation of importance.
The beauty of being where I am now, I'm getting no political ads. I don't I don't have mainstream media, so all I see is sound bites, from anything that I may be flipping through on TikTok and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
or X or any of these
So I'm not
platforms. Yeah.
being subjected to the pain that the
Right.
rest of you are in getting political advertisements. Although I did see a GoDaddy ad being run in Spanish. So I sent a note to my GoDaddy rep and I said, "Hey, wrong language for the country."
Yeah.
Yes, they have a Spanish background and some of the words mean the same, but You should not be running that ad there. And I'd been seeing it for like 2 weeks, and 2 days after I let them know, the ad went away and was replaced with
Oh,
an English speaking ad. So I thought, oh, so the message
yeah.
did get through.
Yeah, Todd, and I think you raise an interesting point around political advertising too, is that I'm not sure that those political ads really work anymore because there's not that many people watching cable television anymore.
No, but it's their cash
So,
cow. It's how they survive.
yeah, I think it's kind of a waste of money, to be quite honest with you. I mean, probably most of the play that these ads get is when they're taken, and put out on X or, YouTube or any of these platforms or a part of a podcast, right? People will
Well,
play these in
wha-
their shows,
one
right?
tactic you can do is if you specifically hate a specific candidate and you're on Facebook, make sure you let their ads play all the way through so they have to pay for them.
Right. Yeah, soak those brands dry.
Well, yeah, just play them. Make sure that, that's one less ad someone else on the other side will not see.
Right,
So,
right. That's true. That's true because they do buy large numbers of impressions, right?
well,
Yeah.
I've seen mostly Democrat ads on TikTok. They bought heavy into TikTok. So believe it or not, even here, I'm seeing Democrat ads on TikTok, which is kind of weird. You would think that they would filter that so that, me watching TikTok in the Philippines would not go against their budget, but it has.
Maybe they know that you're an
Oh,
American, Todd.
maybe, yeah, maybe that targeting is exactly right. That's probably what it is. They're not that.
Right.
I guess they're not that stupid. Okay, we've went pretty long here, so let me prep the captions here. How you guys, this new? I'm using, for those of you that don't know, I'm using Restream.io right now to do the show, and it's a great. It's $50 a month, but you can restream to multiple. We're streaming to 8 different platforms right now. So
Mhm.
it's a viable replacement from StreamYard. But you can find us at newmediashow.com/live. Of course, our Twitter account is at NMS Podcast, or you can find the link at newmediashow.com. If you have a comment for me, you can send it to Todd at blueberry.com or at Geek News on X or at Geek News at geeknews.chat on Mastodon. And Rob?
Yeah, I can be found at, rob.greenlee@gmail.com or robgreenlee@gmail.com also works, and on X at Rob Greenlee with 2 E's on the end, and I have a website, robgreenlee.com. So it's safe to say I can be found on all of the major social platforms and on my YouTube channel too, where I do a bunch of shows up there, on a variety of topics and even EV vehicles. So if you have an interest in that, and what's going on, that would be a good place to go. So
And if you have not yet subscribed to the show and you're watching this, I've got a QR code up there in the right hand column above Rob's head that leads you to the New Media Show follower subscribe page. So make
yeah,
sure that you subscribe to the show when you're over at newmediashow.com. And those of you on YouTube and Facebook and wherever else you've been commenting, the listener count says it says, where's it at? It shows me how many people are watching, but I don't understand where they're all coming from. So
yeah. It's usually just an aggregated number. It's probably
yeah. So anyway, everyone, thanks for being here, and we'll be back next week with another exciting edition of the New Media Show, not the old media. So everyone, thanks so much, and thanks to Mom that's listening out there. She said go podcasting. So